Masechet Sukkah, Daf 23. We learned already the Mishnah that spoke about a number of cases of a movable sukkah, a sukkah that's on a wagon or on a boat, and that could be one range of problems. Is it stable? Maybe that's the problem there. If it's on a wagon or a boat and moving around. However, those they are kosher. And you can even go on them on Yom Tov because there's no problem of hopping onto a wagon on Yom Tov, or if you're on the boat already, if you're on a long cruise and you're on the boat over the holiday, or over Shabbat, and you can go into that sukkah, and that's all good. And the second set of cases was on a tree or on an animal. So a tree is not moving, so it's not a problem of moving around. But a different problem, which is that you're not allowed to climb a tree on Yom Tov or Shabbat because it's not restful, is what the Tannaitic sources say, or because you may come to pluck fruit, which is what the Bavli says. So according to the Bavli, is midrabanan, and so also riding on animals also prohibited. So these are a different reason, is that you're not allowed to go into them on Shabbat or Yom Tov. So these sukkahs are kasher. It's not a problem that it's on an animal. It's just that you can't use it on Yom Tov because you can't climb onto an animal or up a tree on Shabbat. So we have a number of cases, but they are each different. In other words, they're for different reasons, as we're about to see. So those are the cases that we're going to deal with today. So let's jump right into the Gemara. And that asks, Mane matnitin. First, I'll show you an outline of what we're going to do. We're going to talk about on a ship. We're going to prove that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva who permits. Our Mishnah has no machloket in it. It just says all these cases are allowed. Doesn't say who it is. So we like to know. So that's number one. Then we're going to focus on the case when it's on a camel, and then we're going to talk about a different case that's not mentioned in the Mishnah but is related to an animal. Is using an animal as a wall, and we'll see two opinions about that. So let's see the first. Rabbi Akiva hi detanya ha'ose sukato berosh sefina Rabban Gamliel posel Rabbi Akiva machshir. So now we have a Baraita. We're lucky to have this Baraita. Baraita is a tradition that was not included in the Mishnah. And you see, so in this Baraita, we have two single opinions. Rabban Gamliel, he was the Nasi, the patriarch in charge of the Jewish community. And he says, no good, you cannot make it on a boat. And Rabbi Akiva says, yes, it's okay, you can make it on a boat. So often the Baraita will preserve information that is not in the Mishnah. For example, in this case, both of these sages are before the Yehuda Nasi. So maybe the Yehuda Nasi had this Baraita and said, well, he thinks halacha should be that it's allowed. Therefore, he takes Rabbi Akiva's opinion, removes the attribution, and makes it the only opinion. So now it's presented as the majority opinion, but the Gemara then works backwards and says, can we find out whose opinion it was originally? By the way, this will be the halacha. We do follow this, and you can make a sukkah on a boat or on a wagon or on an animal. If you see behind me, this is a picture of the middle of Manhattan, and you see these sukkahs. Right, they have a sukkah. They have a traveling sukkah. They have one on a pickup truck, and they have these on bicycles. Right, so there you go. So was this, I imagine it would happen often that you need a sukkah on a boat. Would you ever actually build a sukkah on top of an animal? I was listening to someone today. I said, no, can't be. No one would ever do that in 5,000 years. But I think opposite. I think that if you're traveling, then it could be very useful to have a sukkah built on your animal. After all, there were litters where important people would be carried, right, in a little canopy, either by people or on top of an animal. And so that showed importance. So this is the same thing. And if you're traveling, to have that always on top of your camel could be useful. So I think this could actually have been done. We'll get to some cases today that are for sure theoretical. So don't worry if you like theoretical cases.
Just for shade, they probably used it. For shade. For shade.
For shade, right. You might have it anyway. Exactly. Important people, when they would travel, they would have a little canopy for shade. So it makes sense. Okay, now we have a fantastic story. I think this is one of the funniest stories in all of the Talmud. So these two people, these two great sages were traveling. The greatest leaders of the generation. Between the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash and the Bar Kokhba revolt, they were in charge. So Amad Rabbi Akiva v'asa sukkah berosh hasefina. So they're on the boat. Rabbi Akiva, I think, just permitted. So he goes and builds a sukkah on the boat. It says at the rosh hasefina. Rosh, what does that mean? That means on the deck, right? It just means on the. Maybe it means all the way in front. Is it a windier spot? Is it the only spot he could have built it in? So the Mishnah also says Rosh HaSefina. So that seems to be where you have to build it outdoors. You can't build it under the deck, and so it is going to be definitely windy. On the next day, it was a big gust of wind, and it uprooted the sukkah, and it blew, probably, it doesn't say overboard, but I'm imagining the whole sukkah blowing right there overboard. Amar lo Rabban Gamliel, Akiva, hechan sukkatcha. So you can imagine Rabban Gamliel, seeing this all happen, and then completely innocently coming and asking, telling him I told you so. Hey, Akiva, by the way, where's your sukkah, right? And you see Akiva, he sees it coming, this I told you so. And he's like, no, don't say it. And I wonder if Rabban Gamliel could keep a straight face as he's asking the question. Okay, so it's a fantastic banter between these two the greatest sages of the generation, and you can see how they disagreed with halacha, and then when it came time, well, you see some of the reason here also, right? It's way too windy on top of a ship. When I lived in Manhattan, we had the owners of the building were Jewish, and they put a sukkah on the roof. Very, very windy. They had to, anchor it down with professional ropes and things. It was kind of scary. So you really have to make it very solid. Okay, so that is a story that demonstrates their two different opinions. Now, why? Amar Abaye. We want to zero in. What exactly are they arguing? Which cases can we apply this to that they would argue or not argue? So if it's if you're talking about a sukkah that's on land, and it cannot withstand a regular wind, an average wind, then that is not a sukkah. Even Rabbi Akiva would agree that you have to make a stable structure that can withstand some, regular wind.
Temporary but stable.
Right. It has, yes. Even though it's a temporary structure, it can't just blow away because of a normal wind. This is important halacha because the canvas sukkahs that everybody always uses, if a regular wind blows it quite a lot. And therefore, those canvas sukkahs are actually quite problematic halachically, even though everybody's been using them for decades. But more recently, they sell the lavud straps. So if you have the lavud straps, or if it's tight, very tight, that even a regular wind I'm not talking about a tornado, a regular wind would not move it much, then it's okay. But you shouldn't use that loose kind of canvas because of this. Everyone agrees it's no good. Now,
but the problem is not it's being ma'akir of the sukkah. That's what you saw on the boat.
Right. Well,
this is not being. This is just moving the walls a little bit.
If the wall is moving a lot, that's like oked. It's not here. It's not now. It's not there. Now it's there. Right. It's not in the same place anymore when it's moving so much. That is halacha that Chamad Yosef writes it that way. The opposite case, if it can withstand a typical wind, an untypical wind, atypical wind, a very strong wind, then everyone agrees that it's okay, right? If you make a very strong sukkah, it sounds here like even Rabban Gamliel would agree that if you made a very strong sukkah, even on a boat, it would be okay. The problem is that a typical sukkah is not strong enough in that situation. So everyone would agree in that case. The question is, if it can withstand a regular wind on land, but it cannot withstand a very strong wind, an atypical, very strong wind. We're equating a regular wind on the sea with a very strong wind on the land. So therefore it's the same thing. So according to the Rabban Gamliel Sabar, Sukkah dirat keba ba'inan. Vechavan de'na yichola lamod beruch mesuya deyam lo kelum hi. So Rabban Gamliel thinks that you have to build it as a permanent structure. Remember that list of Tanaim who all said it has to be dirat keva, right? Rabbi Shimon, this is 4 walls. Rabbi, who says these 4 by 4. Rabbi Yehuda, this is more than 20. Rabban Gamliel is also on that list back on Daf Zayin. And he said, yes, it has to be made as a permanent structure such that it can withstand a wind even in the sea, which is a typical wind in the sea, which is the same as an unusually strong wind on the land. Because when you build a house, you don't build a house for just a regular windy day. You build a house that even if there's a storm, your house is not going to fall down, right? We're not talking about a tornado, but even an unusual storm, your house should not fall down. And so you have to make your sukkah very strong, according to the Rabban Gamliel, and therefore on a boat, a regular sukkah on a boat is not going to be good. Rabbi Akiva Sabar, Sukkah dirat aday ba'ainan. Vechavan de'yichola lamod beruch mesuyad yabasha keshera. Rabbi Akiva defines Sukkah as a temporary structure and is built as such, and therefore, as long as it can withstand a regular wind on the land, it's a kosher Sukkah. And even if you put it on a boat or on top of a roof or in a very windy area that's unusually windy, it's still okay because the structure is defined as a dirat aday. Okay, good. That's case number 1. And now we understand, now we know that that is in fact Rabbi Akiva. Next, we're going to talk about the case of the camel, and we're going to follow, this is going to follow Rabbi Meir. So, o al gabe gamal v'chule. Matnitin maneh, again, the Mishnah has no attributions, no machloket. So, who is it? What, did anyone ever dispute this? Yes, maneh matnitin Rabbi Meir hi, detanya. So we have a Baraita that says if someone makes a sukkah on top of an animal, the Mishnah mentioned camel, this is animal. I mean, the halacha would be the same no matter what it is. Rabbi Meir machshir, Rabbi Yehuda posel. Rabbi Meir says it's okay, Rabbi Yehuda says it's not okay. We have a rule that stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, so that would apply here in this case, right? You see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he composed the Mishnah, just took Rabbi Meir's opinion, and so therefore it's permitted. Now, my tameh de Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say it's no good? Amar kera, Chag HaSukkot ta'aseh lecha shivat yamim. Sukkah re'uya l'shiv'ah, shema sukkah. Sukkah she'ena re'uya l'shiv'ah, lo shema sukkah. So this midrash says, yeah, you have to make a sukkah for 7 days. And now this doesn't only mean that you have to dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. You have to build a structure that is usable for 7 days. Therefore, a sukkah that is fit for use for 7 days, it is a sukkah. But one that's not fit for use for all 7 days is not a sukkah for any of the days. Now, what's the problem with the sukkah on an animal? You're not allowed to climb up onto an animal, to use an animal on Yom Tov or Shabbat. So that's definitely going to be at least 2 of the days of the holiday, even if it was only 1 of the days. It's no good since it's not valid all 7 days. It's not valid at all. It's not a sukkah. That's Rabbi Yehuda's reason for saying it's not good. Okay, now, Rabbi Meir, that's a good point, isn't it, Rabbi Meir? Do you agree? Does Rabbi Meir agree with this drasha? So right now we're assuming, yes, he does agree with the drasha. Rabbi Meir says, I permit it. You know why? Because this, on a Deoraita level, let's distinguish Deoraita and Rabbanan. On the Deoraita level, you're allowed to sit on the animal, right? You're not working it and making it work the land or whatever. It's only Gezerah Midrabanan. Remember, this is all according to the Talmud Bavli. So therefore, on a Deoraita level, it's fit for use all 7 days. So there's no problem. I agree with your derasha that a sukkah has to be fit for 7 days, and it is fit for 7 days, mid-oraita. And now there's another side point, which is a d'Rabbanan. D'Rabbanan say you can't use it, but that d'Rabbanan disqualification isn't going to undo the d'oraita status that it's fit for use for 7 days. It would be like, this sukkah has a lock, has an electronic lock on it, so you can't go there on Shabbat. Doesn't disqualify it just because there happens to be some barrier. So the Rabbanan gezerah is not going to disqualify the Doraita status. Midoraita, you can use it all 7 days, so it is Sukkah. Just don't go in it on Shabbat. So that would be to be Meir. If we read this back and ask, Gemara doesn't do this, but according to the Yehudah, what would he say to that? It would be something very interesting, which is that even the Gezerah de Rabbanan can affect the Doraita status of it, right? Even though Midoraita, you can go in there all 7 days. Once the rabbis come and say, listen, we don't want you to go climbing animals on the holiday, on the holiday, right? We don't think it's a good idea. By them making that law, that becomes an official part of halacha, and now it's unfit for use, totally. And it undoes even the Doraita status, right? According to the Yehuda, it really shows the power of the rabbis to set definitions. Okay, so that's really cool point. Now, asa'ah, okay, so that concludes that section of putting a sukkah on top of an animal. And now we get to using it as a wall. And what we're going to see is a long, lengthy discussion between the Meir and the Yehuda. And then we're going to go on and compare the Meir's opinion here with his opinion in another case of a husband going away, and yet another case of tithing on Shabbat. So we want to try to see if his opinion is consistent throughout all of these different cases. Okay, now asa'ah libehema ledofen lasukkah. You're going to use an animal as a wall of your sukkah. Is this practical or theoretical? I don't know. It sounds kind of strange to use an animal, but maybe if you're a shepherd and you're out with your flock and you want to eat your sandwich, you don't have much building material around, so you take an animal. Say, stay here for 5 minutes while I eat my sandwich. So I don't know. It could be that it was done. Okay. Anyway. So if you do this, is it permitted? To be made, right? Again, we're talking about walls, and walls don't have a lot of restrictions. You can make a wall out of anything. So the Meir posel, the Yehuda machshir. The Meir says it's no good. This is invalid sukkah. It's the opposite. All right, up here, the Meir was the one that says you can make a sukkah on top of an animal. But when it comes to using an animal as a wall, as one of the walls or all the walls of a sukkah, he says no. And the Yehuda is the one here that says it's kosher. It's a valid sukkah. Now, Shehaya Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol davar sheyesh bo ruach hayim en osin oto lo dofen lasukkah. Now we're going to have a whole list of things that Rabbi Meir says you cannot use a living being for any of these halachot. Anything that has ruach hayim, anything that's alive. I think he means by this is animals, not plants. We call plants alive biologically, but you can use plants as walls. So he's not talking about that. He's talking about sentient beings. I don't know what he would say about fish. Anyway, animals, right? You cannot use it for a wall of a sukkah. When you have a courtyard that you want to join together so you can carry in the alleyway, then you have to make a lechi, you have to make a post, a side post. A side post can just be a piece of wood that is put in the floor. What if you don't have that? You take an animal and you take your little goat and say, listen, goat, I want you to stay here Friday afternoon, stay here till after Shabbat, right? Just don't move, right? Can you use that as a post? Rabbi Meir says, no, you cannot do that. Another law of carrying, when there is a well in the middle of Reshut Harabim for travelers, so the well itself is Reshut Hayachid because it's deep and wide, and the rabbis wanted to make it easy for people to be able to draw water from the well, and so they said, you don't have to make a whole eruv, just make 4 corners around the well, each an amah by an amah, and then it kind of looks like it's enclosed. Now, if you don't have pieces of wood to make those corners, can you use animals? And again, we're talking about travelers, so maybe they have animals around, so they can kind of tie up their goat this way and that way and make a corner and do that. He says, no, you cannot use living beings for paseh biraot. Velo golel lakebed. You also cannot use an animal as a covering for a grave. We're talking about here. This is a golel. A golel comes from the galgal, which means something round. So this is a burial cave. This is how they would, we have archaeological evidence that they didn't always bury their loved ones in the ground like we do today, but rather had a family cave, and they would put the body in the cave on a shelf. And then not inside earth, just like this. And then they had this round, heavy stone. It would take a couple of people to push it, and they would close it, and that would protect it protect it from any rodents or thieves going in. And then they would come back a year later when the body decomposed, and they would take the bones and put them in a jar and collect them together, put them near the other bones. So that's, he say he was gathered unto his fathers, right? It means literally gathered, right? You gather the bones and put them next to the jar with the fathers. Vayasef el amav. Okay, so this cannot be made out of an animal unfit to use an animal for a golel. That relates to laws of tumah, because that golel becomes tameh. And okay, so that's all the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Mishum Rabbi Yosef Galili Omer. I like how we just talked about golel, and we talk about Rabbi Yosef Galili. He wasn't round; he was from the Galilee. That's why he's called that. Af en kotebin alav gite nashim. Also, you cannot write a get on an animal. I guess you have no parchment around, so you say, "Hey, bring the sheep over and just write on the sheep." And give it to your wife and say, here's your get. No, you cannot do that. This is for a different reason. In the laws of Gitin, we learned this from the Pesukim, that you can't write it on a live animal. All right, so we see the Meir is consistent, and he says you cannot use live animals for any of these laws. Now we want to ask why. Mai ta'ameh de Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say you cannot use an animal for a sukkah wall? Abaye amar shema tamut. We're worried maybe the animal will die in the middle of the holiday, right? You're sitting there eating and you have the animal as a wall, and then it gets a heart attack in the middle of the meal, and that's it. It's dead. What's the problem if it dies? It could still be a wall, can it? No, the problem is that, let's say it's a goat. It's standing up, so it's 10 tefachim high. When it dies, then it falls to the ground. It's no longer 10 tefachim, and now you don't have a wall. And especially if it's on Yom Tov, then you can't construct a wall because they're not allowed to build on Yom Tov. So he's worried that it's going to die. That's Abaye's opinion. Rabbi Zera Amar Shema Tivrach. Rabbi Zera says the more likely thing, maybe it's going to run away, right? What animal would want to stay in one spot for 7 days, all right? It's just going to move. Okay, so that's the two reasons offered for Rabbi Meir. I mean, we could think of other reasons why Rabbi Meir might say it's no good. Maybe it's just not a permanent structure, right? It's moving all the time. It's moving around, and even if it doesn't run away, canvas. Right, worse than canvas, exactly. So, okay, you can imagine other reasons, but anyway, especially Abaye seems like a far-fetched reason that you're going to worry about dying. But as we go along, I think we'll be more clarified why the Talmud is why Abaye is saying that, or why the Gemara is saying that here for him. Now, befil kashur kol alma la pelige. Now, here's the thing: if it's an elephant, we use an elephant. This is the elephant in the sukkah. Okay, I have a title now. If the elephant is tied, then everyone agrees that would be fine. Because Abaye would say, I'm worried about an animal dying. So what if an elephant dies? It falls to the floor. It's so big, even its carcass is 10 tefachim high. So even if it dies, it doesn't matter. It will still be a good wall. And since it's tied, the Bizera won't have a problem because it's not going to run away. It's tied there and it can't move. I think we have a picture of this. No, this is wait, we don't need that picture yet. Okay. Rather, the machloket is regarding an elephant that is not tied. According to Abaye, he's only worried about it dying, but it's an elephant. If it's an elephant and it dies, it's still 10 tefachim high. So the Abaye would say that case is fine. But since it's an elephant that's not tied, the Bizera is worried about it running away. It's not tied, it might run away. So in that case of an elephant not tied, the Bizera would say it's a problem and say that sukkah is no good. Okay, so we found a practical case that there's a difference between them. And then we question that case. Abaye, who says we're worried about it dying, isn't he also for sure worried about it running away? There's more of a chance it's going to run away than it's going to die. So it can't be that he disagrees. Abaye must just have more worries. It might run away and it might die. So he has to agree with the Bizera's worry. So rather we're going to find another case that they would disagree with. Befil she'eno kashur. If it's an elephant that is not tied, unlike, if it's an elephant that's not tied, the case we said before, kulama lo peligi, everyone would agree that it's not tied, it might run away. Both Rabbi Zera and even Abaye agrees that we have to worry about an animal not tied running away. So therefore, for sure it has to be tied, any animal. Ki pelige bebehema keshura. Notice we switched from pil to behema. Well, and any animal that is tied. Okay, so we're talking about a tied up animal. According to Abaye, who worries about that it might die, he's going to worry about that. This is tied. It's an animal, it's tied, it's not going to run away, but it might die and fall to the floor, and you won't have a high enough wall. According to the Bizera, who's worried that it might run away, it's tied up, so it can't run away. And therefore, it would be a valid sukkah. See, we switched from an elephant to a regular animal because now, in the case of an elephant that's tied, it's no problem according to anyone, right? It's not going to run away because it's tied, and even if it dies, it's okay. So the elephant would not be a problem. All right. Now, for more questions, according to the opinion that says we're worried that it's going to run away, that was the Bizera, and actually Abaye also agrees that we have to worry that it might run away. The Bizera, aren't you worried that it might die? Right? It's a valid concern. So mita la shechicha, the Bizera would say death is not a common occurrence. It's true. All live beings die eventually, 100% of the time, but it's not common that it's going to die today while we're sitting here in the sukkah. So you don't have to worry about such a far-fetched thing that there's a low chance of happening. Okay, so that makes sense. Now we have a different problem altogether, which would apply to everyone, which is that there is space. If an animal is standing, then there's space under it. And this might very well be more than 3 tefachim. And so you don't have a full wall, even if the animal is big, but you can't, we do not say gud achit, right? We do not apply that. If a little goat can walk under, then it's a problem. So you don't have a full wall. So isn't that a problem of using an animal? The answer is means, it's talking about a case where we put palm leaves and laurel leaves underneath, like in this picture. So you have to put some sticks there, some bushes, leaves there to fill up that space, and only then would it be permissible to use an animal as a wall. Okay, okay, another problem, another thing we're worried about. Maybe the animal will crouch down. And if it crouches down, it no longer will be 10 tefachim high. Don't you worry about that. We answered, it must be talking about a case. This whole thing is when we said that you're allowed to use it as a wall, that is all the Meir who said you're allowed to use it as a wall. He was assuming that you tied it from the top with ropes. Here we have a picture of that. There you go. Okay, we had, so it's tied to the roof. And therefore, if it would try to sit down, it would not be able to because the ropes would hold it up. All right, so if you're going to use an animal, not only do you have to tie it so it doesn't run away, you have to tie it up so it doesn't crouch down. At this point, it's becoming more and more theoretical, right? Because this is a lot of things that you need to do. Okay. Hold on now. Back to the person who said that we're worried that it might die. That was Abaye, right? And so you don't have to worry about that because even if it dies, there's ropes holding it up, right? So the ropes will hold it up in place, and it has bushes underneath, and the ropes holding it more than 10 tefachim, so it should be fine. It says no. Zimnin demakim b'bachot mishelosha samuch lasechach. No, sometimes it could be that you, let's say the sukkah is only 10 tefachim high, and so the whole thing is 10 tefachim, and this is 7 tefachim, and so we're relying on lavud for this to be less than, let's say it's 2.5 tefachim. So when the animal's alive and standing up nicely, you only have 2.5 tefachim, you could use lavud. Once it dies, even though there's ropes holding it up, it's still now slouching. and it's going to pull on the ropes a little, and its whole body is going to go down, even just a half a tefach or a tefach, and then it's going to be more than 3 tefachim, and then it no longer will be a kosher wall. And so that's all the problem. You can't say good asik because you only say good asik if there are 10 tefachim to begin with, and so this would not be enough. And that's why even if you have ropes, Abaye would say it has to be it's no good because it has to be alive. Okay, now that's okay. Now that we have all that, we can go back. So it says this is invalid. Everything that we said before, that to make it valid would be a case that would be to be Yehudah. He would only say it's valid in all if you do all those things, and the Rabbi Meir is worried. And so therefore it says invalid because you have to worry about so many things, or doing so many things. Okay, so now according to the Rabbi Meir, it's invalid. Abaye said the main reason is because the animal may die. He's also worried about it running away, but in addition that it may die. And that was the Rabbi Meir. Okay, so now we're going to test out this theory. Umi amar Abaye, Rabbi Meir chayish lemita, ve'Rabbi Yehuda lachayish. According to Abaye, the way he explained the machloket just now was that Rabbi Meir worries about even this unusual circumstance of the animal dying right on the holiday. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, don't worry about it. It's not going to die on the holiday. And therefore he permits using the animal as a wall. Did Abaye really say this? V'hatanan, bat Yisrael sheniset lechohen, v'alach ba'ala lemidat hayam, okay, now we're going to quote a discussion that's found in Masechet Gitin. There's a Mishnah in Gitin, and this whole discussion is there, and we're going to now import it and compare it to our case. So what is the law? Bat Yisrael, where if someone grows up as a woman, a girl grows up Bat Yisrael, she cannot eat terumah. She's in a Yisrael family, but she marries a Kohen, right? And then she's allowed to eat terumah. She becomes part of the Kohen's household. Now, if her husband dies or gets divorced and she has no kids, then she can no longer eat terumah. If she has children, even if her husband dies or gets divorced, she's attached to her children, and her children are Kohanim because their father was a Kohen. So she's part of their household. She's dependent on them. She's part of them. So her definition is still is such connected to a Kohen. She can still eat terumah. So here's the case where the husband goes away on a trip. And who knows, is he alive or not? They don't have phones. They can't text every second to see if he's alive. There is always a chance that maybe he's dead. And so can she eat terumah while he's away when she's unsure? So the Mishnah says, she can eat terumah the whole time. You have a chazakah, a presumption, right? Where something is such as the case all along, then unless something particular changes, you hear some news, some reason to think that there's a change, you can continue the status quo. That's chazakah. So according to the Mishnah, we don't worry about people randomly dying when they go on a trip. However, over there in the Gemara, we brought a Baraita, and the Baraita says the opposite. If a husband, he's going away on a trip, probably, or to the army, and he says, here, I'm giving you a get now, and if I should die, then this get will kick in an hour before I die. It's a conditional get. All right, if he comes back in one piece, that's fine. Then they're married and the get is nullified. But why would he do this? So this, let's say they don't have children, and he doesn't want her to be subject to yibum, because he knows he has a brother who's a wise guy, and the brother's gonna give her a hard time, right? And reasons like that. So therefore, he wants to let her go, or maybe he's going out to war, and then won't find his body, and then she'll be an aguna. This was actually the more common case of aguna in the times of the Talmud. So he says, here's a get an hour before I die. So that way she'll be divorced. Now, same problem. The whole time while he's away, she says, I don't know, is he alive or is he dead? If he's dead, then even from an hour ago, right? Then I could not have eaten terumah. So over there, the Baraita says, Asura lechol betrumah miyad, she cannot eat terumah immediately, right when he walks out the door, even though she still sees him, right? And he's alive right now. Maybe in an hour, when he gets on the boat, he's going to drown, and that means an hour before he can't. This is like the Musa that you should always make repentance an hour before you die, and a day before you die. So the student asks, wait, how do I know when I'm going to die? right? He says, that's the point. So every day, make teshuvah. So according to this, when someone goes away, you do have to worry about even the unlikely occurrence that they might die while they're on the trip. So we have a contradiction between the Mishnah and the Baraita. The Mishnah and the Baraita have no names. So we don't know who said which. And Abaye over there in the Gemara and Gittin gave the following answer. He says the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, who doesn't worry about people dying all of a sudden. Whereas the Baraita follows Rabbi Yehuda, who does worry about people dying. So you see the problem here? In our case of Sukkah, Abaye said it was Rabbi Meir that says it's invalid to use an animal as a wall because the animal may die any second. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't worry about animals dying any second. Whereas here, that was Abaye. Whereas here in Gittin, Abaye says, the Mishnah, which says that the woman can continue eating and you don't worry about the person dying, that is Rabbi Meir. So here he is the lenient one. And it's Rabbi Yehuda that says, no, maybe he's going to die and therefore she cannot eat. So they're switched around. That is the question. To further concretize the question, we're going to bring one more case and then we'll be done. The Tanya Baraita. Halokech yain meben hakutim. If someone buys wine from a Kuti is Samaritan, they're not Jewish, but there were some opinions that they did convert because of the lion, so maybe they're Jewish. Anyway, the point is you're buying wine that needs to be tithed. You're assuming that they're not tithed. It would be true even if you bought it from a Jew, but a Jew, often they do the tithing beforehand. A Kuti definitely did. And you weren't able to take to the Maser before Shabbat. Let's say you bought it a minute before Shabbat. And now you're on Shabbat and you want to drink it, but you're not allowed to separate it because, right, and it's in Bameh Likin, right? Because then you're taking something that you're fixing it. So Omer, Shene Lugin, Shene Atid Laftish. Here's what you can do. You can do it in your mind. You can separate it in your mind and it'll work retroactively after Shabbat. You say, 2 Lugim, there's 2 that I'm going to separate after Shabbat. Now, after Shabbat, I'm going to take 2 and make those tiruma gedola. Let's say we're talking about you have 100. So generally, you take 2%. It could even be less. You see in this picture here, they take even. Oh, here you have 2. Right, 2 are for tiruma gedola. Okay. The picture on the PDF is different from the printed edition. They fixed it in the PDF. So this is better. So you take 2 for that. And then you say that will be teruma. 10 of them, 10 lugim of the wine that I'm gonna separate after Shabbat. They will from now be a maaser rishon that goes to the Levi. So that will be the pink ones here. And umechel tisha maaser sheni. Maaser sheni is the second tithe that you would use for yourself that you take to Jerusalem. So that would be down here. That's a tenth of whatever's left over. So that would be 9. And you take the maaser umechel and you can redeem it because you could always take that and redeem it for money. Other people think that the word mechel means, and you begin to eat. You can even drink it on Shabbat. Rabbi Meir thinks that you can use this retroactive trick. The idea is you have all this wine here that you have to take to the Maaser, and you can't do it on Shabbat. So I say, listen, I'm going to drink some now. After Shabbat's over, I'm going to separate from whatever is left over. So, but I want it to work retroactively, that whatever I separate later will retroactively apply now. And so therefore, I'm going to drink, up to 80% of it now, and I'll be okay. So Rabbi Meir says you can do that. However, there's a machloket. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Osrin. Rabbi Yehuda, especially among them, right, is important for us. They say it's not allowed. What's the reason they say it's not allowed? Because imagine you have all this in a big jug, in a big wineskin, right? And so you drink, 70% of it. And then now the rest of it has to remain until after Shabbat, so that after Shabbat you can physically remove it and give it to the Kohen, physically remove this part, give it to the Levi. What if that wineskin should break, right? Should get a leak in it and all the wine come out? Now you will not be able to separate it after Shabbat. And therefore you ended up violating you ate from that which was, you ate tebel, you didn't take to the ma'aseh. So it's a very dangerous thing to do, to say, I'll eat it now, assuming that it will be there later, right? So they say we worry about the unusual circumstance of something being, of the wineskin leaking. And the Rebbe Meir says, I don't worry about the unusual circumstance. So why are we bringing this whole thing in? Because it relates to what we just said before. You see, over there, Abaye and Gitin said that the Mishnah, even though it's unattributed, the Mishnah, which assumes he's alive, that's to be Meir. Why do you say that's to be Meir? Because in the law of the wineskin, the Rebbe Meir is the one that says we don't worry about unusual circumstances about the wineskin splitting. So the Rebbe Meir is always the one that's less worried. And whereas the Abaye says, the Baraita that says we worry, maybe the husband died, that must be the Yehudah. You know why I said that's Yehudah? Because in the case of wineskin, the Yehudah said we do worry about the unusual circumstance of the wineskin splitting sometime between now and the end of Shabbat, and then you won't be able to take the Tirumah Maaser after Shabbat, and then retroactively you ended up sinning. You can't save yourself. So you see, Abaye, right? That's why he said those things. So this last source supports Abaye's distinction that Rebbe Meir is the one that doesn't worry about it. Okay, now we still have our original question that regarding Sukkah, according to Abaye, Rebbe Meir says it's invalid because maybe the animal will die. And here he's the one that says the husband, well, he assumes it will be alive. So how are we going to resolve this contradiction between Sukkah and the case of the get? So that will be our final answer for today. Ipuch, Rebbe Meir chayish lemita, Rebbe Yehuda la chayish lemita. You know what? Change them around. Rebbe Meir is the one that does worry about someone dying. Detanya, asal lebhema dofen la sukkah, Rebbe Meir posel, Rebbe Yehuda machshir. Rebbe Meir worries about the animal dying, and that's why he says the wall is no good. Rebbe Yehuda says we don't worry about the animal dying. That's why he says it's okay. And so therefore, we're going to stick with what he said in Sukkah, and we'll switch the answers for the person dying. And so, but for the husband dying. And we'll say the Mishnah that says we assume he's alive, that's the Yehuda. And the Baraita that says we think when the husband goes away, maybe he's dead, that is a Meir. So we switch these around, and now Sukkah is reconciled with the case of the husband going away. What do we still have open? We still have the problem is that this will not coincide with the case of Tirumah, of the wineskin, because here it explicitly says their names, and so you can't just switch them around so easily. So that will be the question that we will resolve tomorrow. But just for today, we're able to resolve this question. Yes, in fact, it is the one that says that we worry about the animal dying, both here in Sukkah and regarding the husband dying. Okay, just a last methodological point. It seems that the reason why Abaye, we're bringing in Abaye for Sukkah, for this unusual thing that the animal might die for being used as a wall, is because Abaye said something similar regarding a different case about the husband dying, right? And so since he said something similar about another case, so we're kind of transferring and applying. This is, I think, a good example of the Talmud Bavli trying to reconcile and systematize the opinions across various different subjects. When you do that, you also run into inconsistencies, right. And then the Bavli has to go to the next step and resolve those inconsistencies. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen ve'amen.